I wouldn't succeed in pulling off a good Churchill impression, so I'm better just opening the review with my own enthusiasm. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds.
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender!
Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage and Darkest Hour will very probably earn Gary Oldman the Oscar as Best Actor in a Leading Role, which is the very reason I wanted to see the film in the first place. Like many of those award season films, this one also came out much later here in Austria. I've heard good things about it, but a dominating understanding seemed to be that Gary Oldman is amazing, while the movie is decent. And cut to the chase, I mostly agree with it. To be honest, a year ago I wouldn't have bothered to sit down and still make a review for a movie that was already out for a longer time. Even now, I won't get many views with it, but yet I'm at a point where more and more of you guys ask me about my thoughts and say that you're looking forward to my review. And that's really amazing, to say the least. I'm quite flattered by it and therefore I want to give you my take on Darkest Hour. Maybe this won't be the longest review, but I still hope I can add something fresh to the discussion. Darkest Hour is the newest film by British director Joe Wright, whose first feature, Pride and Prejudice, I still regard as one of the sweetest, most romantic films to this day. In line with its title, Darkest Hour focuses on one of the, maybe the hardest time of Great Britain, and it cleverly limits the story to just 1 month. May of 1940, when Europe not just trembled but went down under Hitler's war machine and the tyranny of the Nazis. Chamberlain's policy of appeasement clearly failed and as a result he resigned, which made way for Britain's new Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, who is without a doubt one of history's most iconic personas, and to do more than just a cheap impression but create this character on screen is a huge task, one that Gary Oldman excelled at. The transformation that, according to IMDb, let him spend over 200 hours in total in makeup is incredible, and for the majority of the film the actor underneath completely vanishes and you only see Churchill. There are actors out there who always keep a very big part of their own personality, and that's great. When we go to see a Tom Cruise film, we want to see Tom Cruise. When we remember the movies with John Wayne, it's almost always John Wayne on screen, but Gary Oldman is one of those actors that often disappear into their roles. He's like a chameleon, and whether it's Commissioner Gordon, Sirius Black, Drexel, or Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg, the character is probably more recognizable than Gary Oldman, and in Darkest Hour his talent can shine at a whole new level. And the way the movie introduces us to this important figure of history actually reminded me of the beginning of Der Untergang, Downfall, when Hitler gets a new secretary and we are exposed to him through her arrival. Darkest Hour does the same thing, and while it's actually not historically accurate, as Elizabeth Layton, played by Lily James in the movie, didn't become Churchill's secretary until 1941, I enjoyed this filmic technique quite a bit. It's May of 1940 and Churchill has to decide the course of Britain in the war. Does he give in to peace negotiations with the Nazis, which would only mean surrendering Britain's freedom and independence, and with our hindsight today, probably the chance to defeat the Nazis in the long run altogether, or is he trying to convince the people, and as it is portrayed in the movie, the other politicians foremost, to keep resisting the urge to protect the lives of Britain's soldiers and citizens now, because it means sacrificing them to the Nazis later on? Though many historians say the historical evidence shows that Churchill was always quite resolute in his opposition to making peace with Nazi Germany, the film opens this question and I think that's alright. Many moviegoers and critics have suggested that it would make a nice double feature if you not just show both films back to back, but actually intercut Darkest Hour with Christopher Nolan's latest film, Dunkirk. Because that critical event in World War II takes place in the time span the Darkest Hour focuses on, and it's a key player in Churchill's struggle with Chamberlain and Lord Halifax and their persistence to give into peace negotiations with Herr Hitler. Joe Wright does a fantastic job in creating this image of a strong and fearsome Winston Churchill on one hand. King George, who is portrayed by the great Ben Mendelsohn, even admits to his face that he's frightened by him, and on the other hand, a man who's almost all alone and who has to carry the responsibility of his people's future on his shoulders. In my favorite scene of the movie, Churchill leaves the center war room, where he's surrounded by Chamberlain and Halifax, who are just waiting for him to fail, to withdraw to a tiny little room where he's making a telephone call. Who is he calling? None other than FDR, the President of the United States. Churchill is in dire need for help, but even the USA, who are still neutral at this point in time, can't help him, and Joe Wright frames Churchill so close, and a few seconds later he shows that small room in a wide shot, completely surrounded by pitch black darkness, a visual motif that creeps into almost all scenes of the movie. And yet Darkest Hour can be quite funny as well, mainly through Churchill's sense of humor and his British nature. He has the hats, the cigars, and the way Oldman pulls off his mannerisms, and especially his speech, is both extremely impressive as well as quite funny at times. For someone whose native language isn't English, the advice that Churchill's wife Clementine, played by Kristin Scott Thomas, is giving to the new secretary at the beginning couldn't be more accurate. One shouldn't try to understand all his mumblings, but simply try to catch the clearer word threads in between. Darkest Hour has many astonishing scenes bringing to life the British Parliament, the underground cabinet war rooms, and the tense and fascinating relationships between Churchill and his contemporaries. But as the movie progresses, it also seems to simplify some developments. The way he convinces his fellow politicians didn't feel that justified for me regarding their strong opposition before, and Operation Dynamo, the huge Dunkirk evacuation, gets pushed to the side at the end, and it's coming across as if Churchill just made the right phone call to a friend who then sends civilian ships to the rescue. I'm not that familiar with the actual operation, but that seemed rather strange. The big climax of the movie, if you want to call it that way, Churchill's inner struggle to find the strength to stick with his right gut feeling and conviction that one can't reason with Hitler, is also resolved in a scene that was just too easy to recognize as a very easy filmmaking or writing option. Churchill takes a little detour towards the end of the movie, and while I was emotionally engaged a lot in what was going on in that particular moment, I also knew just instantly that this is very likely not the way it actually happened, but rather completely fictional, which is kind of a shame in a film like this. It's a good scene, but also a little bit cheap, I thought. Darkest Hour is a fine film with an incredible Gary Oldman, some beautiful scenes, and an overall great menacing, but also rather cozy British atmosphere, if you don't mind me using that word. But it's also a movie I don't see myself going back to in the future. For that, it's not mesmerizing or unconventional enough. In German I'd say, Gary Oldman ist der Chef und Darkest Hour ein unterhaltsamer, atmosphärischer und nett verdichteter Historienfilm. In diesem Sinne, niemals aufgeben. Nie, nie, nie. I give Darkest Hour 7 out of 10. It's more like 7.2, but I don't do that.
Your Majesty.
Prime Minister.
Alright, that's it like always. Comment below and let me know what you think about Darkest Hour. You can hit me up on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram simply at TheJimmyCage. And if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all I have to tell.